Hello and welcome to Career Track by Climate Connect, a series where we explore the journeys of people building their careers in climate space. I'm Maghdhi, your host for today, and I welcome you all for today's episode. We started this episode to understand the climate landscape and help young professionals know where they can fit in and to be able to contribute because we really need more people in the climate scale. And for today's episode, we have Miss Rhea Karan. Rhea is a project manager and an impact consultant at Purpose. She has been working across India and other countries on various sustainability issues like sustainable mobility, air pollution, waste management, and various other sustainability issues. Ria, welcome to Climate Connect, and we are really excited to have you for this
Thank you
episode.
so much, Magdi. Thanks for that introduction. And hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining in. So, before we begin our conversation, I would just want you to start with a brief intro of yourself and explain in simple term what you do, what your work is, and everything.
Sure, sure. So as you mentioned, my name is, of course, Rhea Karan. I'm based in Bangalore, was born and raised here. And I'm a project manager at Purpose. I've been with Purpose for a little over 2 years now. Some of you may be familiar with our work. We work in the climate communication space, and that's actually a very interesting space to be because it falls under this unique junction of communities, of conversations, of climate and of culture. So, while it is, of course, dealing with a very daunting challenge, it is also, we are able to bring in culture, comms, and all of those interesting and fun elements to sort of move the needle. My background is actually in psychology. I have a psychology degree from UCLA, and a minor in social entrepreneurship as well. So this actually allows me to apply that interesting blend of, how people behave, what their motivations are, what their values are through my psychology background, and sort of, tying in the principles of social inclusion and social diversity. So it is sort of at that interesting intersection. And I'm also happy to talk a little bit more about what climate communications also means, if that helps.
Yeah, sure. But before moving into climate communications, I got one question. From
Sure.
psychology to climate related work, communications, like how did that shift? What brought you towards this space?
Yeah, it was sort of a happy accident, I would say. It's not like I got into, went to college with sort of the goal of pursuing climate. I did take up a psychology major, and along the way, I think the concerns of climate and sustainability were really weighing quite heavily. And I wanted to see how I can sort of apply that in my work and in my career, which is why I picked up a social entrepreneurship background where I was able to get more exposed to, both climate as well as other facets of social work like inclusion and diversity, public health, things like that. But it was sort of a combination and culmination of my interests because psychology taps very much into the, how do you build awareness? How do you shift behaviors? What really motivates people? What do people value? So, I'm able to sort of bring in my psychology background into the communication space and my social entrepreneurship background into the climate space. So it did happen sort of through trial and error until I got here. But I guess that's also a learning and a lesson, right? That your path need not have to be linear in order to be meaningful or impactful. You can sort of find a way to apply your skill sets, apply your interests, apply your background, apply your knowledge in ways that make sense. Because as you said, Magdi, the climate crisis is not going anywhere. We need more people to step up and take charge. It needs to feel less like activism and more like what we do in our daily life, right? So that's sort of how I stumbled upon this.
That's amazing. I think that's really interesting also because a lot of people don't know where to figure out and still they're doing something that they really don't want to do. So you figured out in
Correct,
that way and that's really great.
correct. Yeah, thank you. Happy accident, as I mentioned.
Okay, so you mentioned about communications and I know something that Purpose does with creativity, storytelling. So, like, can you shed some light on how do we do it and kind of impact that it creates?
Yeah, I think the word, even for people within the climate space, when you say climate communications, it doesn't automatically conjure a picture of what we do. Like a lot of people have questions around what that looks like. And to put it very simply, climate communications, everyone in climate communications is a storyteller. So whether you are, breaking down a scientific brief for someone to make it digestible to the public so that they understand the implications of a report, whether you're a policy advocate who's trying to move the needle around something at the government level, whether you are a campaigner just pushing for action on the ground, everyone is sort of telling a story, right? You're making information digestible, you're making information meaningful, you're seeing what people value, and you're sort of communicating that to them, right? So, what we do here at Purpose is number one, we use climate communication. So, we sort of look into the culture, into the psyche of what people, what people are motivated by, what moves them, what troubles them, what needs they have. And what we do at sort of the initial level is we try to build awareness, right, on the climate story. And this could be with different communities. It could be with urban communities, rural communities, marginalized voices. At the basic level, we try to build awareness on certain climate issues or, sub issues around climate. Once that awareness is built, often there's an element of behavior change that needs to come in, right? Whether it's the way you use public transport, whether it's how you're segregating your waste, um, whether it's, using energy efficient resources. The next level is sort of changing behaviors. And the third stage, and this is of course not always linear, it may happen separately or it may happen together, but we also work on shifting policies because sometimes people influence policy, sometimes policy influences people, right?
Mm.
So we also shift policy. And that sort of encompasses this entire story of awareness, of behavior change, of policy shifts. That sort of encompasses what we call as systems change, what we need for systems to actually like grow and evolve and change, right?
Mm.
So what we do is we enable the conditions for system change. This could be through both culture, conversation. So we use a blend of both digital means. So social media, things you would find online, as well as on ground tactics. So, events,
Mm.
and, we kind of leverage certain cultural festivals, things like that, in order to really bring climate into the conversation and have awareness behaviors policies shift. So that's a little snapshot into my world.
That's interesting. Like, I wonder, like, if you could share some example or some a way, a behavioral change or any true on-ground impact that you saw from one of these projects. If you could share with our audiences, that would be really great.
Sure, sure. We worked on a couple of interesting campaigns recently in Maharashtra. And the reason I want to point these campaigns out is because it's a little bit more accessible to probably the audience watching. But number one in Pune and Indore, so in both Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, we worked on a campaign called Waste Nahi Re. And what we were trying to do through that campaign was limit the amount of food waste that's going into landfills. So we wanted to reduce the food waste footprint. A campaign like this is exciting because food is something that's so close to people's hearts, right?
Mm.
And we could really use that as a lever to tie in really fun elements to bring this campaign to light. So we had very fun activations. If you're familiar with Master Chef and things like that, we had a mystery box challenge where all the elements that were under the sort of cloche were items people might discard, let's say peels and things like that. How do you create a dish out of items you may previously discard, might usually discard, right? So this was a fun way to not just think of food as waste, but think of it sort of beyond that. We had a master class where we brought on chefs to kind of say what you can do in order to reduce the food waste footprint in your home. We had a restaurant activation where we used a lot of these elements. So that's one campaign I want to bring to light. We did see a shift in awareness at the end of the campaign. Another one also around the concept of waste, but not food waste. We're talking about waste at large at the household level. It was called Army Sorted, Mumbai Sorted. It was based in Bombay, and the objective of this was to ensure people are segregating waste at the household level. Because what happens to, the waste that's not segregated, it ends up in a landfill and starts releasing methane, right? So we wanted to ensure we can get waste segregated at the household level. And even through this, we were able to bring in wellness and sustainability into our tactics to talk about waste not just as a small issue, but rather as a holistic piece and sort of shift behaviors around there. So there are two examples that are sort of, relatable to our daily contexts, because both food and waste is something we deal with on the daily, one on awareness building, one on behavior shifts.
That's interesting. I think it would get a real good impact as well on ground.
Yeah.
And this thing requires a collaboration with multiple organizations, like you mentioned about chefs and I think some NGOs and partner organizations. How do you think that building partnerships, collaborations actually help in creating social environmental change, rather than just like a tick box of we just collaborating with people and
Yeah.
not creating the impact? So, how can we do
Yeah.
that?
I think what's important to understand when you work in this space is that no change is going to happen if we're working in silos. It's
Hmm.
very important. For example, Purpose, as is a global organization, right? Um, so we may work in certain cities with certain communities, and we may not have that local knowledge that is needed, right, to actually work with communities. So I think the first principle that I'd like to highlight is it's about the time you spend listening rather than the time you spend, presenting or solving. It's important that you prioritize the communities, you prioritize the NGOs that work in the space, you prioritize the grassroots orgs on the ground. So I think it's important that we listen. So that means, gathering data, gathering insights, gathering stories. That's sort of a first step. And then
Hmm.
second step is prioritizing co-creation. So with these communities, ensuring that you are making solutions not for them, but with them, right? You're co-creating the solutions. So partnerships goes through every stage of the process, not just who the NGO that you're partnering with, but you really need to make sure you're partnering with the communities that are the end users of
Hmm.
this, so that
Hmm.
they see themselves not just as beneficiaries, but as change makers or as authors of their own stories and their destinies in the climate change conversation. So yeah, that's basically how we view partnerships, ensuring we're valuing local knowledge alongside expert knowledge. So bringing in both sides of the conversation.
That's great. That's great. You also mentioned that you've worked on international projects as well, like with countries like Kenya and all. Did you find the sustainability the way it's practiced in India and in the other countries abroad? Is there any difference, or is it kind of similar only?
To be very honest, Magdi, my experience with international projects is quite limited. I did have the opportunity to work closely with the Kenya team on one project at Purpose around waste segregation. And my previous organization, Socion, as well. I worked on some public health projects in Africa. But from my limited experience, what I've seen is that the differences are often smaller than we may think. Like, of course,
Mm,
the context changes. So, the politics may shift, the infrastructure that's available may be different, the culture may be different, but sort of the fundamentals and the values are the same. So, like, trust matters, right? Wherever you're working, local voices matters, local knowledge, traditional solutions matter. What sort of differs in the way things show up in what we call the global south is that, or rather, again, it's again a connecting thread, is that climate in these countries isn't abstract, right? It manifests through people's livelihoods, through
Mm.
their health, through their food, through their transport. Um, so while the systems may be complex, there's a lot more similarities we may apply through the values and the fundamentals that drive it. But of course, understanding the finer nuances of culture, of society, is paramount before you dive headfirst into any region, even within India, right? It's very important that you get the data, you get the insights, you hear the stories before you can sort of apply a one size fits all solution.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's what we call as bottom-up approach, because when we know the regions, we come up with solutions that are impactful for that region. That's true. So, as you know, this podcast is meant for young professionals who want to be the part of this space. So, those who want to enter sustainability or maybe communication, some strategy management, like what would you suggest to them? What kind of skills or mindset they require to be a part of this space?
Um, I like that you said skills and mindset because it's important to understand that it's like a blend of the two. When
Mm.
you're talking skills, you're talking about more like functional skills, or technical hard skills that you may call it. So we'll touch upon that first. Um, so as I mentioned before, there are multiple ways to enter both the climate space as well as the climate comm space. And I'll talk about communications in specific. But there are several different roles, right? You may be playing the role of someone who's closer to the research side or the
Mm.
monitoring and evaluation side. So to be able to treat both qualitative and quantitative data, that's one skill. And just note
Mm.
that you don't need to have all of these skills. You can have a combination. You can excel in one of these skills. But just going through the list, you can be someone who's well versed with visual design, because that's, of course, very important to move the needle with communication. So is writing. Then you need to be able to deal with PR and media. There are basic campaigning skills. But on the mindset side, right, which are the more people skills or the power skills, I think what's central to this work is empathy. Um,
Mm.
and when we say empathy in the climate space, it's not just about being able to just feel for the issues of another community. It's about being able to place yourselves in their shoes so that you can understand what would change their behavior or build their awareness, right? Because with communications, you really have to get into the heart of the issue. So empathy is one. Collaboration, as you mentioned, it's so central in this work that you have to work with NGOs, you have to
Mm.
work with funders, you have to work with partners. Um, so collaboration is one. Adaptability, you have to be dynamic. Things on the ground are constantly shifting. You need to be able to shift along with them. And resilience. I think that's in our work, it's important to note that change is not going to happen overnight. It may take
Mm.
months, years. It may not even go the way you planned. So being able to be resilient towards that. And then there are skills that sort of fall in the middle, neither skill nor mindset, like program management, or strategic thinking, things like that. So again, it's about honing those technical skills, but ensuring that your mindset sort of fits in with these people skills, because that's what you really use. You can always build the technical skills. You can do courses, you can do things like
Mm.
that, but you need to ensure you develop the mindset as well.
Mm. Mm,
Yeah,
that's right. A blend of skills as well as the mindset that you really want to be a part of this space.
exactly.
Okay, like your journey must have been full of challenges from where you started and the point that you have reached. Based on your experience, what are some of the challenges that you face, and what would you suggest to young professionals who would want to navigate and overcome these challenges?
Challenges in the sense of my personal journey, I think where I started off, so when I graduated from college, I found myself working in the apparel space. And while I did enjoy my job at the time, I didn't really resonate with, the broader picture, right? And it took me, I moved back to India. I first did work in in the impact space, but again, more around like capacitating and livelihoods with Soshan. So it took me a little bit of time to find my niche and fully apply myself to where my skill sets lie, right? And that I think is something that people shouldn't be daunted by. Um,
Hmm.
the climate space in many ways is quite nascent, right? So it's not as established a path as, let's say, pursuing law or something else where the climate tracks are cut out for you. The space is constantly evolving. The roles are constantly evolving. The skill sets are constantly evolving. So if it takes time to find your footing, I would say don't try and be an expert on day one. That's one thing. Build range. Not just depth in a certain issue area or sub-issue area with climate, but immerse yourself both in the issue areas that you resonate with, but also expand those sort of horizons. Don't just sort of pigeonhole yourself into one sub-issue area under climate. Um, and yeah, build resilience. There are things that are going to be daunting in this space, whether it's burnout, sometimes it's low pay in certain organizations. Uh, Sometimes it's the inability to actually affect tangible change through certain projects. I think it's important to build that resilience and important to steel yourself towards knowing that this is a slow change, but an important one.
That's correct. That's correct. So like you mentioned about all these things required to be resilience, and I think something that's more here important is also networking
Mm.
or mentorship. What do you think such activities that play a role in for people entering into this space, and how can they help like, learn from these skills, help build networks, and get into here?
Yeah, I think mentorship is super important and it may not always present itself in the way that you think. So it may not be a formal mentorship program, but
Hmm.
always lean on the leadership of your seniors. People are always more willing to help than you think, both at my previous organization, Soshan, as well as at Purpose and even in the apparel space. I think it's important that you ask questions, specific questions. More often than not, you'll be lucky enough to have leaders who will take time out of their day to mentor you. And it, again, doesn't need to be a formalized setup. You can sort of have these chats one on one. So I think mentorship is very important. But um, one that is less sort of recognized or more undervalued is building a network of peers, right? Peer networks are so key to navigating this space. It's important you find like-minded individuals. They will help you not only with future opportunities, connections, ensuring that impact is sort of amplified with collaborations, but also just day to day navigating the complexities of this space and how daunting it is. It's nice to have peers that you can lean on, whether it's in terms of expertise, experience, or just listening and chatting. So don't undervalue peer networks.
Like, how can we build peer networking? Suppose somebody who is not from the space where they want to be, but they want to be part of it. Like, social media is one. Is there any other way in which we can build in our networks?
Go to any and all events that are in the
Hmm.
space, whether it be virtual, whether it be on ground. I highly recommend you go to these events. Um, I can guarantee the organizations that you work with will have no sort of hiccups with you trying to build your expertise. So even if it interferes with the workday, just take the time out to go to events. You'll not only be able to build your knowledge, but you'll also be able, and this is much more important, you'll be able to interact with a set of very cool, very like-minded people in the space, and you never know what that will unlock for you or your organization or your journey, right?
Hmm.
So it's very important that you go attend events, both virtual and in person. Social media, of course. Never hesitate to write to orgs if you just want to like have a chat about what they do or what how your org can support them or vice versa. Everyone in this space is collaborative. We understand the value of working together. So yeah, pick up the phone, go to events, don't be afraid to chat to the person next to you, the loudest person in the room, the quietest person in the room. Yeah, just go for it.
That's true. I think that's where we have to show that zeal and enthusiasm if we really want to be a part of it.
Exactly, exactly. And I think Global Shapers is a great community that facilitates a lot of these events. I've had the chance to go to a couple, and some people are at the start of their journey. Some people are, have been working on a number of cool things. So
Mm.
that's a great place. They have a lot of mixers, they have a lot of virtual connects as well. So just building that base, building that network.
Like one final question on this part, like what thing do you think like one can change and be it in terms of mindset again or a policy or practice that India can focus on so that it can make its transition smoother because you work in this space, so your experience could just help in.
I think in India, like the focus often is on a very isolated fix or a one-time thinking or a short-term fix. And so I think one thing that's missing is that actual system lens and the timeline it takes to shift anything, whether it's livelihoods, health, mobility. So that's one thing. Another thing is that now, increasingly, climate conversations are beginning to feel like activism. It's a very small group of people, but it needs to
Mm.
be something that's universal, right? It needs to be
Mm.
basically like civic participation. This should be sort of transcending all conversations when it comes to the political realm or when it comes to how corporates work. Um, so I think it shouldn't be a set of fringe groups or a set of CSOs or anything that's working on this. It needs to come into our daily life through civic
Mm.
participation and other means. So I think that's one shift that's very necessary in India to make climate solutions sort of accessible to everyone.
So we've come towards the end of this session, and before the end, we do a rapid fire round with all our guests. So a quick rapid fire questions for you. Okay,
Okay,
so
perfect.
one book, podcast, or a person that inspired your journey.
I'm right now reading a book called Abundance by Ezra Klein, and someone else. That's quite good. Podcast, I'll give you a film. I know I'm cheating, but I'll give you a film.
Yeah.
It's very old, but it sort of stood the test of time. But it also was what first planted the seed of how sort of serious the climate change is, and it's The Inconvenient Truth. It was made by a US presidential candidate at the time, Al Gore. So that sort of shocked both the world into talking about the issue as well as my young mind as well. Yeah.
Okay. One small daily habit that helps you remain climate conscious.
I I've been trying to be more conscious of the way I navigate my city and the, mobility options that I choose. So as and where possible, I try to walk or I try to use the metro. Granted, living in a city like Bangalore, the metro options are limited, but I am trying to be a bit more conscious in how I can make just my mobility choices because the footprint from that is quite large.
Hmm.
At the urban level.
Correct. Then one systemic issue that you would fix overnight if you had one night time.
Oh, wow, that's such an interesting one. I would probably fix the access issue, so ensuring that climate solutions are equitable, because right now we've all realized we are in trouble, but making sure that all communities, whether vulnerable or not, that they all have equal access to solutions in this space.
Okay, thank you. Before we close in, any final message or a word of advice that you would want to give to young change makers out there?
I think primarily is that the climate movement needs many roles. It doesn't matter if you don't come from a traditionally sustainability focused background, or you didn't study, let's say, you didn't go to certain universities, that is less relevant than the way you're able to apply your skills to the role. So the climate space, we need researchers, we need strategists, we need communicators, creatives, we need artists, policy thinkers. There's sort of a niche here for everyone, right? So find the work that feels true to you, that resonates with you. And yeah, I think real change is something that's collective. So everyone is sort of needed in this story.
Thank you so much, Ria, for taking out time and joining in today. I really found your journey inspiring. At the same time, I think I'm pretty sure the audience would also connect with you, who would start from the beginning and reach up to the level that you are currently. That's really great. Thank you so much, Ria.
Thank you so much, Magdi, for having me. I hope so too.
Thank you everyone for staying with us till the end. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Stay connected with us for more such inspiring stories. Thank you.